From a real-life mermaid girl to a little boy who survived decapitation, here are 7 amazing medical survival stories that totally baffled doctors. Number 7. Surviving a 47-floor plunge. According to statistics, only half of all people who fall more than 3 stories survive. At 10 stories, just about everyone dies. Alcides Moreno, on the other hand, survived a 47-floor drop from a New York skyscraper. On a cold Monday morning on December 7, 2007, Alcides and his brother Edgar were sent to wash the dark glass face of the 47th floor luxury Solow Tower building in Manhattan's Upper East Side. They took a lift all the way up to the roof, where a 16-foot wide scaffold was hanging. They had just stepped onto the scaffold when the cables holding it in place suddenly slipped and the platform collapsed. Edgar immediately went tumbling down and landed on a hard brick wall over 600 feet below. He died on the spot. Alcides came down afterwards after his side of the scaffold broke loose. He was found by rescuers on the ground with a pile of twisted metal while clutching the scaffold controls. He had miraculously survived, having held on to the scaffold's aluminum platform, which slowed down his descent due to air resistance. However, he was close to death's door, and rescuers had to move him slowly like a fragile egg. Alcides received a blood transfusion of 24 pints, plus 19 pints of plasma, which is enough to replace the blood in an average person's body twice. He underwent 16 surgeries to repair his extensive injuries, which included damaged kidneys, collapsed lungs, cerebral blood clots, and 10 major bone fractures. He underwent months of therapy to regain his physical strength and balance, rebuild his mental skills and memory, and had to relearn many basic tasks, such as speech and dressing. Doctors admitted that Alcides' case was nothing short of a medical miracle. Although finally able to walk and function again, Alcides is no longer able to resume his previous work. The court found that the scaffolding company was at fault for shoddily installing the cables that suspended the scaffold and were forced to settle a multi-million-dollar lawsuit filed by Alcides. Number 6. 20 minutes underwater. In August 2011, 12-year-old Dale Ostrander had been on a swimming day trip to Long Beach, Washington with his church group. In the midst of the excitement, the boy got swept far from the shore and was then dragged under by a riptide. It wasn't until about 20 minutes later when rescuers managed to pull him out of the cold Pacific Ocean, and as expected, by that time he was pulseless and no longer breathing. In other words, he had drowned. But the emergency responders did not give up. They performed CPR and put Dave on IV. At the hospital, they further induced him into a coma. 4 days later, he woke up. His parents and church group thought of it as a miracle from God, as according to them, Dave's survival was against the laws of nature. Since then, many have tried to figure out how exactly the boy survived for such a long period underwater. Some experts suggested that the frigid waters in which he was submerged in induced a convenient state of hypothermia, where his body temperature went down and protected his brain against oxygen starvation. The concept is similar to cryogenic preservation, an attempt to preserve a person's brain and body functions through freezing in order to permit their future revival. It was either that or something less far-fetched, such as Dave's young age and overall good health. Number 5. Half man learns to walk again. In 1995, Chinese man Peng Shulin was run over by a truck in the town of Shenzhen and was left in 2 pieces. Despite having his body completely severed from the waist down, he remained alive. His lower half was already beyond salvation, but doctors needed to preserve his internal organs from the damaging effects of outside exposure. They closed up Peng's bottomless torso by transferring skin from the other parts of his body body through a series of operations. It took a team of more than 20 doctors to save Ping's life, who, in the end, was left only 78 centimeters, 2 feet 6 inches tall. For months, Ping's body was too weak to contain his organs, forcing him to maintain a horizontal position. He was bedridden for years, and doctors in China had little hope of him leading a normal life again. Ping, however, decided not to give up. He built up his arm muscles, which he needed to rely on for mobility. He later got in touch with a rehabilitation research center in Beijing and got them to assemble a unique walking device for him. 2 bionic legs were attached to a special egg cup-like casing that fit Ping's torso. With it, Ping retook his first steps around the center and begun to walk again with his specially adapted legs. He was later reported to have opened his own bargain supermarket called the Half Man Half Price. Number 4. Toddler survives decapitation. In September 2015, 16-month-old Jackson Taylor from Australia was riding in a car with his mother and older 9-year-old sister along the Newell Highway in New South Wales. As the mother was driving around a bend, 3 reckless teenagers in their own vehicle crashed into her car, and the family's life changed forever. Little Jackson's neck was broken, while his sister suffered internal bleeding. They were airlifted from the site to a hospital in Brisbane, and Jackson was found to have suffered an internal decapitation. In such case, the vertebrae bones holding the head have been completely severed, with the only thing holding the head and spine together being mere strands of muscle or tissue. According to statistics, about 70% of those inflicted with the injury die immediately, and 15% more die later at the hospital. Children especially do not survive that injury. Fortunately for Jackson, he was treated by Dr. Jeff Askin, the man known as Australia's godfather of spinal surgery. His spinal cord was also miraculously fully intact, despite the extensive injuries surrounding it. In a 6-hour operation, surgeons used a piece of bone taken from one of his ribs to graft into his damaged vertebrae. The toddler was then induced into a coma for several days and then underwent months of treatment. This included him wearing a halo that prevented any neck movement to allow the bones to fuse back together correctly. Jackson gained full recovery, and so did his older sister, who had to have 5 centimeters of her small intestines removed to stop her internal bleeding. Number 3. Pin-up model. With her tall, slender figure, pretty face, and long, smooth hair, Katrina Burgess exhibits all the attributes of an aspiring young model that she is. But one look at the English girl's bare back would reveal a deep vertical scar running from her nape all the way down to the waist, a reminder of a painful tragedy that she managed to survive. In January 2009, the then 17-year-old Katrina was heading towards her home in Weymouth, Dorset. As she left the M5 motorway, she accidentally crashed into a ditch, resulting in severe injuries. Her back was snapped, her neck broken, both her lungs were punctured, and several other bones, including her leg, pelvis, and ribs, were fractured. Surgeons faced a difficult decision. Without spinal surgery, the severe injuries to her back would continue to deteriorate, resulting in eventual death. But the risky procedure carried a risk of instantly killing the teenager or permanently paralyzing her whole body. She was told that she may never walk again. When first admitted, Katrina had a metal rod inserted from her hip down to her left knee, secured inside with 4 titanium pins. Her riskiest operation came a week later. Doctors sliced open her back and inserted 6 more horizontal rods along her spine in order to support it. The following week, a titanium screw was inserted to the top of her spine to keep her broken neck in place. After weeks of painful procedures, Katrina was able to walk again and stopped taking pain medications within 5 months. Later, she was approached by a London-based modeling agency, which became interested in her after seeing her pictured in a newspaper article that featured her story. She signed up with the agency after having been put back together with 11 metal pins and rods. Number 2. Born twice. 16 weeks into her pregnancy in 2016, Margaret Bomer found out that her unborn child had a tumor growing on its spine, known as sacrococcygeal teratoma. The mass stole a large portion of the fetus's blood supply, putting it at risk of cardiac failure. In order to save the baby's life, surgeons had to prematurely cut open the mother's womb and operate on it. At the time of the operation, the 23-week fetus and its tumor were roughly the same size, and the chances of survival were 50-50. The premature baby, discovered to be a girl, had her heart virtually stopped during the procedure, but was kept alive by a heart specialist. As she was still weak and not viable, the little girl was placed back inside her mother's womb and was then sewn up. 12 weeks later, the baby, named Lynn Lee, came into the world for her second time, having been delivered via cesarean section. Again, a second operation was then conducted on Lynn Lee after a week to remove the rest of the tumor from her backbone. She is expected to live a healthy life and could one day boast the fact that she has experienced being reborn, literally. Number 1. Mermaid Girl. Solow Pepin was born in 1999 in Maine, USA, with an extremely rare congenital deformity called cyanomelia, otherwise known as mermaid syndrome. Both her legs were completely fused from the waist down. To make matters worse, Solow had no urinary bladder, no uterus, no vagina, no rectum, a very short large intestine, only one ovary, and only a quarter of a kidney. Doctors anticipated that she would not survive longer than a few days, most likely due to complications associated with her weak kidney. Days turned into months, and months turned into years. At the age of 3, her natural kidney failed, and she had to start dialysis. By the age of 8, she had already undergone 2 kidney transplant surgeries. Although there are cases of children with cyanomelia who underwent leg separation surgery, such a procedure was too risky for Solow, as her legs were fused too much, and any attempts to separate them would sever large blood vessels that were crossing from side to side. Despite her challenges, Solow made the best of her life. She attended school and gained a large following through her appearances in TV shows and social media posts. She was described as having a shining personality and an inspiration to many. In October 2009, Solow came down with a cold that quickly turned into pneumonia. She passed away at the hospital at the age of 10. Before her death, Solow was only one of 3 known survivors of cyanomelia worldwide who haven't undergone leg separation surgery. Also known as the water bear or the space bear, the tardigrade is widely considered to be the most resilient animal on Earth. It is an almost microscopic creature, usually less than 1 millimeter in size, with a scrunched up head and a plump, long body.